Hello there, welcome to this edition of Global Business Africa. In the course of the hour, we'll run through all the business news stories you need to know about from Africa and beyond. But let's start with a run through the markets here for you. So South African equity starting Monday pretty strongly, closing about half a percentage point higher. Kenya's market also in positive territory, up 0.7. But over the last 6 months, remember, it's actually in the red. It's down by about 6.4%. Shares in Kenya's most profitable firm, Safaricom, they closed the day marginally higher on the day that the firm's CEO, Bob Collymore, passed on. He was 61. On his watch, the firm's shares rose by over 500%. Here's what's coming up tonight. West African countries adopt a new name for planned shared currency, the Echo. This year's three-day summer Davos kicks off in China's coastal city of Dalian. And a Kenyan farmer embraces tech to give his business a much-needed boost. Our starting point tonight is in West Africa, specifically the Economic Community of West African States. It's a trade bloc that essentially is home to about 15 different countries. Its leaders have adopted the name ECHO for their planned single currency, and they say they want it to be issued in January 2020. Yes, I know it's very close by. Now, the 15-member group endorsed the new name at the bloc's 55th ordinary session, which took place over the weekend in Abuja, Nigeria. According to ECOWAS, this shared currency will also be based on a flexible exchange rate regime coupled with a monetary policy framework designed to boost economic development in the region. Now, the group is currently working with the West African Monetary Agency, the West African Monetary Institute and central banks to speed up the implementation of this proposed single currency.
The authority reaffirms our single currency. The authority instructs the Commission to work in collaboration.
The nationwide strike will affect major activities of various public sectors controlled by the government, including education, health and agriculture. The Association of Senior Civil Servants of Nigeria says the National Insurance Commission has failed to comply with the agreement they made last August 2018 to provide insurance coverage for all its members across the country. The association is a top member of the country's Trade Union Congress and has the responsibility of overseeing the welfare of over 80,000 senior employees of the federal and state government. The group says the insurance coverage agreement is meant to cover for the risks and financial losses Nigeria's senior civil servants may suffer as a result of economic instability in the country. The Nigerian government says it is already in negotiation with the senior civil servants to prevent the looming strike. However, the senior civil servant group says the current negotiation will be stopped and an indefinite strike will begin if their request is not granted within the next week. Nigeria's President Muhammadu Buhari in April this year signed a new increased minimum wage into law and promised a better life for Nigeria's civil servants. Phil Ihaza, CGTN Abuja, Nigeria.
Now, the trade policies adopted by the G20 do have wide ramifications for emerging and frontier economies, especially on the currency front. Egypt, representing the presidency of the African Union, also attended this year's G20 event in Osaka in Japan. So how does Africa's second largest economy position itself amid such uncertainties? CGTN's Cheng Lei caught up with the Egyptian trade minister.
So it looks like China and the US have called a truce in the trade war. And also the G20 is declaring that there will be more fair, transparent, predictable and stable trade, or that's the aim anyway. What do you think?
I think also both of the two countries should consider that the globe is related to them. And the globe is like in a complete one, let's say, linked field. So what happens here affects there. So we are all linked, we are all tied. So we must be really very careful in the coming days what moves we should take, and we should also look at from the perspective, this is my opinion, from the perspective of competition, fair competition, you know, with discipline. I think we could cooperate more, not compete, have like integration, who can do what. And this at least what we do in Egypt. We see that we are in the middle of everything, in the middle of everyone.
The Chinese president and your president also held talks as part of the G20 meetings. How do you think China-Egyptian trade are going to develop going forward?
We see a lot of development. We see, you can even see it, the flow of the businessman on a daily basis. You hardly can find a seat on a plane Okay, and we look as real partners that we can go for integration. The China Belt and Road plan and strategy, you can feel it if you see the map. Egypt in the middle of also of everything. If you're coming from Joburg or Cape Town up to Alexandria, heading to Europe, we are on the main axis. If you are going from the most of the east, then having a turn to also the north or going completely to the west of Africa, you are in the middle also, you know. So like in the square of many transactions, you know, in a real center.
While the volume of trade and investment grows with many countries, sometimes those countries talk about growing the quality, the depth of investment and diversifying exports to China. What's Egypt doing in that respect? Is it mostly automotive and textiles?
Automotive, textiles, leather manufacturing, furniture, agromechanical products. In general, many of the what we call industrial products, white goods, that depend on some labor intensive. Large areas, so you're not shipping all the way air, you know, you're not shipping large volumes. You can make it on CKD or some more manufacturing using some good components. We have, by the way, a very good platform, industrial platform in Egypt with supply chain that can help any industry. In our area, in the complete region, you will not find this platform, industrial platform. Maybe you are not the best, maybe you are not, of course, on the level of Europe and China, but if you see the whole area, the region, the African, the Middle East, where we are based, you will not find all this wide and deep platform of industry.
Right, and a quick run through some company news. Let's start in Nigeria. Electricity distribution companies over there say for the nation to enjoy a constant, steady power supply, an investment of at least $100 billion is needed in the sector over 20 years. According to stakeholders, about $10 billion of that amount will be required just to strengthen Nigeria's distribution networks. Elsewhere, Zimbabwe is set to pay $10 million to the South African utility Eskom in a bid to reduce its debt to the power supplier. Zimbabwe is currently grappling with pretty severe power shortages, and this comes after Eskom cut back power exports to the cash-strapped country following unpaid debts of about $33 million. South Africa's seasonally adjusted ABSA PMI has actually edged above the neutral 50-point mark. The index rose to 46.2 in June, up from 45.4 in May. Now, the increase was driven by solid improvements in the business activity with new sales orders and indices, which together account for more than half of the PMI's weighting. And finally, the German investment bank Deutsche Bank has drawn up plans to eliminate hundreds of jobs in its global equities division. The move is part of a major restructuring plan designed to turn around the lender. Deutsche Bank is currently struggling to generate sustainable profits after years of poor performance. That's a run through your company headlines. Time for a short break. You're watching Global Business Africa. Here's what's coming up next. Qatar Airways finally launches direct flights to Mogadishu. And we'll be looking back on the legacy of Safaricom's former CEO, Bob Collymore.
The world economy as we know it is about to change. Global business reports highlight emerging markets, developing countries, and dynamic sectors worldwide. We feature top analysts and newsmakers to provide perspectives on every facet of business. From an on-the-ground perspective, we provide you with balanced and objective assessments. Fast, sharp, and insightful. Global Business, only on CGTN.
Every story starts out like this.
Okay. We'll head up now.
But beyond the rush of the numbers, there's always a more fundamental question. What happened? Who has been affected? When market-moving decisions are made, who's responsible and why.
Let's get some reaction on ground. Joining us in Johannesburg is Sutra Naidoo. Hello, Naro.
This
Well, of course.
is how all stories begin. See how they end. Only on Global Business.
There's more to this place than just glorious landscapes. There's more to it than just, say, Table Mountain or glorious, endless salt flats. There's more to it than countries that are home to some of the deepest mines in the world. There is so much more to this place, even if it is home to some of the finest diamonds on the planet. It is the sheer diversity of the people who call Southern Africa home and the relentless drive to make it a better place that make it so special. And we know that because this too is home. No one knows Southern Africa like we do. CGTN, see the difference.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and Global Business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Welcome back to the program. Let's focus on the aviation sector in Somalia. Qatar Airways has launched a direct flight starting on the 1st of July from Doha to Mogadishu. Now, as part of efforts to rejuvenate an already growing international carrier market in Somalia, a range of international airlines have resumed their flights to the country in recent years since the armed group Al-Shabaab was pushed out of the capital, Mogadishu. Let's try and get you the latest details on this. CGTN's Abdulaziz Bello is on the line now from Mogadishu with more on this. So Abdulaziz, what investments were made to the Aden Abdullah International Airport to beef up security ahead of the resumption of these flights?
Well, Ramah, the launching of the Qatar Mogadishu direct flight, the government here in Somalia is hailing it as a major milestone, and it's a process that was forthcoming. It began with the previous administration in 2016, and they were making talks and trying to do some upgrades on the airport before the Airbus A320 of Qatar Airways landed here today in Mogadishu. So that on that end is the government's comments on that. But when it comes to the airport itself, there's so much renovation that has taken place in the recent months, including the upgrading of the runway. Now, after the collapse of the Somali central government, the airport was in a bad state, and after the Somali government handed over the ownership of the port, the airport to a Turkish company called Favori, they upgraded the airport to international standards that have seen the rise and the increase in the number of international airlines, making Somalia their destination in recent years, including Turkish Airlines, Ethiopian, and now Qatar Airways. Now, apart from that, flights also can land late at night here and take off at night. So that is also a major progress. But security-wise, the government of Somalia says that the airport in Mogadishu is the most safest in the region. This is because there was a deadly attack on a plane, rather, Dalo Airbus that was headed towards Djibouti sometime in 2016, exactly February. And after that, the government beefed up security, including sniffer dogs, and increased scanners that are being conducted by AMISOM, the Somali police, as well as the members of the intelligence community. So all these were the stages set before the arrival of Qatar Airlines here in Mogadishu, Ramah.
Right. So as you mentioned, Ethiopian, Turkish Airlines, and of course now Qatar, they all fly into Mogadishu fairly regularly. They've got flights coming in every week. Walk us through the traffic that's coming into the airport. How has that changed as more and more international carriers fly into Mogadishu?
Well, Ramah, since 2011, since 2012, rather, Turkish Airlines began making daily flights to Mogadishu, and that created a renewed momentum and the urge for more airlines to come and invest into the aviation sector. Now, today, in a joint press conference with the chairman of the Qatar Airways, who was visiting Mogadishu, the Minister of Aviation, I asked him how many flights they have been able to monitor in the past 1 year or in the past 6 months. He said that in the first half of 2019 itself, the Aden Abdul International Airport has recorded more than 80,000 flights only in the first half of 2019. These are planes that have taken off from Aden, both local flights and international flights. But he says that the urge and the need for international airlines to invest in Somalia is because of the growing need of the Somali diaspora and the growing need of the aviation industry for people to travel and to connect from Somalia to the rest of the world. It was isolated for close to 3 decades, and the urge for Somalis to travel all the way from the United States, from Asian countries, and from Europe directly to Mogadishu through only one transit is the reason as to why they are pushing more international airlines to come and conduct their direct flights to Mogadishu through their original countries.
Indeed. One last question for you. Kenya Airways, the Kenyan carrier, that was also set to resume direct flights to Mogadishu, but we understand the launch of that was delayed. Do we know when they're likely to resume?
Well, there's currently a major diplomatic standoff between Somalia and Kenya, and it's not clear whether that might affect the aviation sector, especially of flights coming out from Kenya. But in the past couple of months, we've witnessed Kenya Airways conducting direct flights from Mogadishu to Nairobi. But in recent months, we've seen planes being forced to fly out of Wajir. They fly from Mogadishu to a military air base in northeastern Kenya for security clearance, and then they connect to Nairobi. So this is being attributed as one of the major setbacks that has caused the delay and the change in Kenya Airways from launching its direct flight to Mogadishu. Bear in mind that Kenya Airways, apart from coming from Nairobi, will benefit a lot more than all other airlines because the vast majority of Somalis, most of them, they transit through Nairobi, where there's a large Somali community living there, especially also refugees living in the Dadaab camp, also big population for Somalis. So Nairobi is a major transit hub for most Somalis, and one that aviation experts here say that Somalia and Kenya need to work out their diplomatic issues and ensure that there is smooth transportation and air travel between Mogadishu and Nairobi, Ramah.
Indeed, we'll leave it there for the time being. Thank you for the update. That's CGTN's Abdulaziz Bilo on the line there from Mogadishu. Now, up north, Egypt is marking the 6th anniversary of the ouster of the then ruling but now outlawed Muslim Brotherhood back in 2013. Now, the date 30th of June has been engraved into Egypt's history, and it's celebrated every year. So how has the Egyptian economy developed ever since the ouster of Mohamed Morsi 6 years ago? CGTN's Yasser Kim finds out.
Security at its low point, terrorism prevailing, and an economy shattered. That was the state of the country on the 30th of June 2013. Apart from restoring security, rebuilding the economy was the main priority after the June 2013 uprising.
Reducing state expenditure was a major policy to begin with. Economic reforms are based on cutting subsidies and raising state revenues, for example, increasing taxes and restructuring the tax collection system. In the last few years, it has succeeded in reducing the budget deficit and achieving a surplus for the first time.
Financial aid from friendly countries like the Gulf nations and China have helped maintain sustainability, but the IMF loan deal of $12 billion was a turning point.
Egypt worked with the IMF on rigorous measures to fix ailments in the economy that go back 30 years. The $12 billion loan in 2016 was linked to a program that tackled the subsidy issue, social services, fiscal policies and investment laws. The support of the IMF has opened the door for economic aid from donor countries. It has also created confidence within foreign investors to establish the badly needed businesses in Egypt.
Economic growth is now at 5.2%, up from -2%. Foreign reserves more than tripled, and the all-important tourism sector is booming after a complete shutdown in previous years. However, there are still challenges ahead.
One major challenge is the accumulation of local and international debt because of the reforms. A plan should be set up to cover the debt payments. Servicing the high debt prevents the government from spending on basic services and the needs of the people.
The numbers reflect a significant improvement in the economy since 2013. What remains is to alleviate the burden of reforms on low-income earners by reducing inflation levels and creating more jobs through investments and production. Yes, Hakim for CGTN, Cairo.
The dual-listed retailer Steinhoff International remains under quite a bit of pressure as the holding company still attempts to resolve its major accounting issues. The company's stock tanked in December 2017 when its then CEO, Marcus Euster, resigned, and the board uncovered massive accounting irregularities and possible fraud. Now, local and international investors lost billions of dollars. Here's CGTN's Angelo Coppola with the latest.
Steinhoff has now decided to try and act and recover around $60 million from ex-CEO South African Marcus Euster. The company is also going after ex-CFO Ben Lagrange for another $18 million because they unjustifiably enriched themselves.
I think this is what investors wanted to see initially, not just now, when they need it for the cash. And the amount in question is, about R1 billion between the two men. I think this is what we've been looking for this whole time.
But some suggest that the holding company has bigger problems than chasing ex-management.
Of course, people such as Christo Wiese want their $59 billion. And we can call that claim spurious, but there's a class action suit coming out of the Netherlands, which in the past they've done fairly well. They have a very good track record of winning their cases. And this is a bit of a slam dunk. We're pretty sure there was fraud.
While corporate governance and transparency are now being pursued, investors in the stock, when it crashed, aren't likely to go back in again.
I wouldn't touch this with a 10-feet barge pole. I mean, it's still a bad investment. There's still a lot of cloud over it. We don't know what's going on. And in terms of, the space that they operate in, looking at the global economy, I don't see it coming back anytime soon, unfortunately. So as a result, you just decide to stay away. I mean, some things are cheap and they're cheap for a reason.
There's some trading activity happening at the moment, but it's not significant. Even day traders are struggling.
They're struggling to find worse news than, well, it turns out our CEO and CFO were liars. So there is some day trading activity happening there, and that's really all it's worth at this point.
It's going to take years before the company resolves all the issues it's facing, and it's unlikely that there's going to be any value unleashed in the meantime. I'm Angelo Coppola for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
Safaricom's CEO, Bob Collymore, has died today. He succumbed after...
Chief Executive Officer Bob Collymore died at his home after battling with acute myeloid leukemia. As CEO of Safaricom, the telco has history. Until his demise, he was the longest-serving CEO of the telecom firm, having taken over from his predecessor Michael Joseph in 2010. Safaricom shares fell by 2.7% when markets opened on Monday following his death. Collymore, who was 61 years old, was due to step down in August after 9 years at the helm, during which time Safaricom's shares price rose by more than 400%.
And he will be sorely missed. Right then, time for a short break here on Global Business. Here's what's coming up next. We'll have the latest from Summer Davos. The three-day event is kicked off in Dalian. We'll also take a look at how state-owned enterprises in Vietnam are ramping up their use of machine learning.
Business in Africa is at the crossroads. We celebrate those who are adopting and thriving despite the challenges, from grassroots to big businesses. Global Business takes you along for the ride as we track the making of a giant. Only on CGTN.
For a look at some economic data out of the country, the country's foreign currency reserves.
With a dedicated and diverse team of anchors, CGTN now brings Africa to the palm of your hand.
I'm Perina Karibe in the heart of Nairobi, which is bustling.
From everyday heroes to the continent's most powerful figures, we bring their voices to you.
We haven't changed. And this is something most of us are very excited about.
We bring you news that's changing perspectives,
News that brings Africa to the world. CGTN. See the difference. How will your world change today? What happens here? What happens there? Or what you make happen for yourself. If it matters to you, it matters to us too. Your stories are the stories that need to be told. Africa Live. Find your voice.
Accra is my kind of city. That's because when I'm here, I feel like I'm back home in Lagos or Abidjan, which are two of the major cities I grew up in.
Business in Africa is high risk.
After about a decade covering business news on the continent, I've learned it's all about the high risk, but also the high returns and the high energy. You simply have to adjust in order to keep pace. When I started out as a journalist, my dream was to open people's minds to the different perspectives. From the CEO in the boardroom to the trader out in the street, we all have different stories. From Accra to Addis Ababa, from Cairo to Cape Town, and I wouldn't have it any other way. Here at CGTN, we realize that Africa is on the move, and it's moving fast, but we're moving right along with it. I'm Ucheo Koronkwo, and I'm a business anchor and reporter at CGTN.
Welcome back. Let's recap the stories making you headlines at this hour. Hundreds of people gathered in the city of Omdurman across the River Nile from Khartoum on Monday to protest against the ruling military transitional council. They're calling for the immediate handover of power to a civilian body. Now, this comes a day after at least 8 people died in clashes between security services and protesters on Sunday. South Sudan's President Salva Kiir is in Kenya on a 2-day state visit. President Kiir met his host, President Uhuru Muigai Kenyatta, in Nairobi. The two leaders discussed revitalizing the peace agreement, security, as well as trade. And finally, according to Turkey's foreign ministry, 6 Turks detained in Libya by forces loyal to Commander Khalifa Haftar have been released. This comes just a day after Turkey warned the militia of stern action unless its citizens were released immediately. That's a run through your headlines. Now, the 3-day 2019 edition of Summer Davos opened on Monday in the northeast coastal city of Dalian in China. Now, the gathering is also known as the 13th annual meeting of the new champions. It focused on a rather interesting theme, Leadership 4.0, succeeding in a new era of globalization. More than 1,900 participants from over 100 countries and regions are on hand for the sessions taking place in Dalian. Now, China's growth outlook is the talk of the town at Summer Davos. CGTN's Shecheng is on the ground in Dalian with the latest on what is at stake for China and what's changing about the country's growth.
China and the U.S. appear ready to put the trade war behind them. That eliminated an immediate threat to global asset prices. Now, investors are turning back to China's economic fundamentals. There's a forum dedicated to debating China's economic picture.
The China-U.S. trade friction was a first in many ways. It taught us a lesson and alerted many Chinese companies. Now, Chinese companies are thinking more long-term and are paying more attention to technology. Businesses will become more persistent with long-term plans.
First, I think Britain's break away from Europe has become more likely to increase risks. The second risk is China-U.S. trade frictions. It has eased down after the meeting of the two countries' leaders, which I think is a very good thing. But China-US trade frictions are fundamental change in the long-term relations between the two countries. Now it seems various political factors, obstructions, and fluctuations still exist.
Here's the dilemma. The overseas demand for Chinese goods will be weak based on data coming out of key markets like the US and Europe. And the situation is unlikely to improve before more US Fed rate hikes. But the US Central Bank is unlikely to do so anytime soon. So China has to rely on its home turf for economic growth. But if the domestic economy cannot keep up, China's trade surplus with the US is likely to increase as a result because imports will be weak.
First and foremost, what we are seeing, of course, is saving rates decline. We are seeing more consumers spending. But let's remember this. We're also in a place where demographics are no longer China's friend. The working population is flat to declining. That's a concern. And so I think the real question that we've got to wrestle with is, will China's consumer-driven economy move fast enough, and will it be engaged in a productivity revolution versus where it is today?
The fight for GDP remains the foundation for the government work, but China promises to focus on quality over quantity. That means every gain in the GDP should be a gain in jobs.
The second reality is China has done phenomenally well in the consumer aspects of technology. Weibo, WeChat, Douyin, and what's been happening in terms of TikTok. These are two examples where China's been doing extraordinarily well. But when it comes to the industrial side of the internet, China is not doing as well. It's still very reliant on others to provide the software that powers the industrial complex here in China.
Before China and the US reach a long-lasting trade deal, Chinese companies are advised to reflect on how to beef up their own strength. Experts say this will make the economy more resilient to global economic uncertainties. Xia Cheng, CGTN, Dalian.
Now then, let's dive into the world of medicine and tech. Detecting and removing precancerous polyps is known to be one of the best ways of preventing colon cancer. Now in China, machine learning is reporting breakthroughs in detecting the rate of colorectal polyps, as CGTN's Weilin Tan now reports.
A clinical trial in a real setting. A colonoscopy procedure is underway. Dr. Wang Pu is on the hunt for any abnormalities, including polyps. A blue box and an alarm alert him to a possible polyp. And another one. Here, Dr. Wang is assisted by a real-time automatic polyp detection system. In a routine colonoscopy, he will be relying solely on his eyes.
The value of the AI system is for the easy-to-miss polyps. For example, some polyps are partially occluded by a colon fold or feces or some fluid, and some polyps are very flat and without a clear boundary. So with the help of this AI system, we can reduce the misdiagnosis of such polyps.
Medical experts say while most polyps are benign, a subtype known as adenomas can eventually become cancerous. And in most cases, because they don't trigger any early symptoms, it's hard to know if you've developed them. And this is why it's all the more crucial to get your screening done. If a biopsy confirms the polyps are adenomas, they can be removed promptly. Dr. Wang was the first author of this study, along with Chinese doctors from the Sichuan Academy of Medical Sciences, researchers from Harvard Medical School, and others. The first randomized controlled experiment showed an increase of adenoma detection rate by almost 50%. Evidence has shown that an increase in the adenoma detection rate is associated with the decrease of interval cancers, those detected within 12 months of screening. In this study, the higher detection rate was mainly due to smaller adenomas. Dr. Wang explains why this is important.
Everyone knows that smaller polyps bears less possibility to transform to cancer. But I want to say that even the risk for each polyps is low. The number is very huge. So the overall expected cancer incidence is non-negligible. So this system has some significance for the ultimate goal to reduce the interval cancer.
Dr. Liu Xiaogang, a co-author of the study, has been in this line for 25 years. He hails this AI system as unprecedented and a breakthrough in the field of gastroenterology.
If my physical strength isn't good, my productivity and accuracy in performing an endoscopy would be different in the morning and afternoon. Second, my experience 10 years ago and now are different. Also, if patients don't prepare well for a scope, even if I want to be on the lookout for polyps, I may not find them. So only by increasing detection rates can we reduce the country's increase in large intestinal diseases.
Dr. Liu did say that the AI system presently over-detects on anything that looks like a polyp. So next steps include to further train the system to reduce instances of false positives, as well as to look into the slight delay of the system with the goal of long-distance use. In the meantime, there are plans to expand the sample size of this study.
We may apply the study to a few other centers to include doctors at the county and grassroots level to take on this research. If we can increase their capabilities to increase the detection rate of adenomatous polyps, we can benefit more patients.
A blind control was used to reduce operational bias. Endoscopists did not know they were using an AI system. Meanwhile, a tandem study with a back-to-back procedure of a routine and an AI-assisted colonoscopy is in the works. All these are steps to further validate the effectiveness of the system. As the old saying goes, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. Wei Lintang, CGTN, Chengdu City in Sichuan Province.
Now, apart from China, many other nations are taking quite a few steps in increasing the amount of tech they use in especially manufacturing and analysis. Vietnam has long been a massive magnet for FDI, in part because of its cheap and abundant labour. But let's be frank here, labour that cheap doesn't always last. Wages inevitably do rise. Now, though, there's a different approach. Many state-owned firms are ramping up the use of automation, robotics and machine learning. CGTN's Ryan Meltzer reports from Hanoi.
With barely any workers in sight, this state-owned yarn spinning factory is in sharp contrast to the labor-intensive model on which Vietnam's manufacturing growth has been built. Some foreign investors here are also starting to rely more on technology, while other foreign firms, like Sweden's Tetra Pak, are helping Vietnamese companies make the shift to Industry 4.0.
We have customers who have essentially nearly a 4.0 facility, from automated batch production to sensors on all processing to ensure automation on quality monitoring and control, all the way through the filling machines when looking at integrating into a smart warehousing system as well.
State-owned Venasoy is among those companies embracing Industry 4.0, including using augmented reality to get help from Tetra Pak's overseas experts. Vietnam's recognition of the need to move up the economic value chain, reduce reliance on labor-intensive industries, and adopt the use of the latest technologies in manufacturing and services is a critically important first step, but just a first step nonetheless. Some 94% of Vietnam businesses are small or micro enterprises, and 3% more just medium-sized. And economists say they are struggling even to adopt the basics like e-commerce or e-payments.
Many industries in Vietnam, they talk about Industry 4.0, but they don't understand what actually is. So the government needs to, I think that it needs to invest a bit more on raising awareness towards the people and businesses, especially private businesses, towards what it means.
As wages continue to rise, Vietnam's labor-intensive model will lose its competitiveness. So more companies will have to do like Venasoy and adopt Industry 4.0 to boost their productivity, even if only in small, incremental steps for now. Ryan Meltzer, CGTN, Hanoi.
Now then, research into artificial intelligence and machine learning. It's one of the world's fastest evolving tech sectors. But it doesn't come without resistance, especially from us, human beings. The tech is currently facing questions over the impact it's likely to have on people, productivity and their jobs and their income in years to come. Here's CGTN's Richard Bestick explaining some of the challenges facing AI and machine learning in business and society.
Not since this man, Michael Faraday, began toying with the basic elements of electricity way back in the early 1820s has there been such a disruptive discipline as artificial intelligence. Trouble is, this time around, the changes are coming at a blistering pace. Governments and businesses globally could struggle to adapt. The China-Britain business fusion invited AI experts to London to examine the costs in jobs and ethical impact. Many among them concede concerns if the future's unregulated.
It is a big concern, ethics in terms of whether, some of the AI technology that's being used is ethical. And also, obviously, in terms of job, AI is here to replace the human intelligence, to replace the labor. That's, by definition, the value that AI creates. So that means that a lot of people will lose a job.
So jobs will be lost to robots, particularly in fields like accountancy and legal services. However, according to one startups expert here, the way to getting one over on the robots is to keep it personal.
What I'm conscious of is not losing that humanity side, because I think it's really important that we as people stay connected, and connection and meaningful connections are very important to me.
London's a European hub for artificial intelligence, while the Chinese government has ambitions for the country to become a world leader by 2030. Global Tech Advocates, a private sector tech network, says China has the data, London has the startups, and the pair dovetail nicely, it's said.
China has a lot of data. They know how to scale businesses. They have built some great tech behemoths, Baidu, Alibaba, Tencent, JD.com. The UK has great talent, great universities, a lot of creativity and innovation, and now in places like London, we're becoming an AI centre of excellence.
And it's moving fast. It took 2 centuries before Faraday's tinkering with electricity supercharged the world. With AI, it'll be just a matter of decades. Society and governments playing catch-up. Richard Bestick, CGTN, London.
Right, then a quick run through commodity prices for you now. So let's focus on oil and gold. OPEC agreed to extend the production cut right into the end, really, of Q1 2020. And the markets clearly liked that message. Just look at that, 64.83, and it actually went higher than that, 65.14 at about 16.32 GMT. Now, the decision has to be ratified by the non-OPEC producers, but that's a given. Most of them, like Russia, are essentially on board as well. Gold, however, the one that's not benefiting at this point in time, down 1.33% at that similar time. The weekend's truce between the US and China in the trade war, that has pretty much made gold falling out of favor, rather, with the market. Here's what's coming up next. The tech theme continues with a story of a Kenyan farmer who's embracing technology to boost his enterprise. And we'll focus on a Tunisian trade expo that's supporting locally made products. All that and more is in the pipeline.
Images may appear to be identical, but looks can be deceiving. The difference is not always obvious. It has to be discovered. There are always different sides to a story. We put the focus on the details. To see more, to understand better. CGTN. See the difference.
The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Qanater, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN, see the difference.
You don't find the stories of North Africa by sitting on the sidelines. No one else will take you where we can in North Africa. And no one else will show you what it's all about. CGTN, see the difference.
Welcome back to the programme. Now, agriculture is one of the key drivers of Kenya's economy. It accounts for the bulk of employment and nearly half of GDP. And the government has pegged food security as one of the key 4 sectors that will spur future economic growth. But in a country where smallholder farmers are driving the sector, one farmer's come up with some interesting ways of growing his agribusiness and widening his margins. CGTN's Penina Karibe has that story on Grassroots tonight.
Caleb Karuga meticulously tends to his chicks. He is a known journalist who quit his job in local television station for agribusiness. His love for farming began during his early years while growing up in a farm in rural Kenya. But he says his venture into poultry farming was initially not on his plans.
I wanted to know the source of my food. So I didn't start poultry farming as a business per se, just for me to feed myself and my friends, my colleagues. But then demand crept in. Take to my colleagues and like, wow, we love the taste of those eggs. Where did you get them from? We love your chicken. Can you bring us more? So the orders are piling up. So somehow it morphed into a serious business.
That was in 2010. With very limited knowledge of how to handle poultry, he lost many chickens, sometimes up to 20 in a single week. It took him 4 years to stabilize, years spent visiting other professional poultry farms and scouring the internet for every piece of information that could help improve his business. With time, Caleb discovered the magic of value addition.
I realized that I was selling a seed. So if I sell an egg at, say, Kenya shillings, say 10 shillings, if I waited for 21 days, I could sell a chick at $1. And that makes a lot of sense. So where would I rather be? Sell an egg at a quarter or just $1? Rather go selling chicks. And that's how now my business is anchored on selling day-old indigenous chicken.
The hatching farm is located several kilometers away from the brooding farm. He explains the distance helps in reducing transmission of diseases from the chickens to the eggs. In this farm, it's all about technology. There's a 12,000 capacity incubator working round the clock.
Our machine is quite good. We don't have to have much interruption because the machine is automatic. We have the machine set in such a way that whenever there is a variation in temperature, humidity, or maybe current flow, we have installed a trigger that is a siren that is going to tell us of when a problem has developed.
From here, the delicate day-old chicks are shipped straight to the clients. But for those not confident enough to take care of the fragile chicks, Caleb rears them for an extra $1 per chick until they're a month old. This is a brooding room. There are currently 500 chicks in here, just a week old. But this is one of the most sensitive stages of poultry breeding. This room can hold up to a maximum 700 chicks up until they get to a month old. And during this time, a number of factors have to be considered. One of them is temperature. It has to be regulated from 37 degrees Celsius when they're just a week old and gradually lowered to 28 degrees Celsius by the time they get to a month old. There's also the issue of diseases, and to guard against that, they have to be vaccinated on a weekly basis. Caleb takes pride in the quality of his chickens. The organic vegetables come directly from his farm, and he supplements that diet with a black soldier fly pupa. He's taken advantage of social media to connect with clients from as far as the UK, some in need of training to set up a thriving agribusiness centered on poultry. But Caleb also knows there is room for growth in this business with a little more help from technology.
Well, if it's possible for us to have even cameras that are remotely censoring the temperature and the humidity, I don't have to come here every day. Robotics, everything is able to check, even the hygiene.
A clear example of just how much technology can impact on agriculture. Penina Karibe, CGTN in Nairobi, Kenya.
On to North Africa now. The first edition of a National Day focusing on locally made products in Tunisia has been organised by the authorities over there with a view to boosting the consumption of products made in the country. Authorities say less than a third of the country's citizens opt for locally produced products, and only 10%, in fact, are familiar with local barcodes. In their view, there's a need to restore consumer confidence in locally produced goods.
This three-day event is designed to put spotlight on the quality of Tunisian products and their competitiveness and raise public awareness about the need to consume local products.
This initiative aims to encourage the consumption of national product. It is vital for the economy, the Tunisian enterprises, as well as the citizens.
Authorities say Tunisian industrial sector can presently provide value-added products. Industrial exports amounted to about $13 billion in 2018, posting a 19% rise in comparison with 2017. They account for 90% of total exports.
Tunisian factories are making competitive products in terms of quality, quantity and price. Consumers here in Tunisia and abroad have multiple choice. Our goal is selling locally and exporting to foreign markets.
Prizes were handed over to 15 innovative companies operating mainly in the agribusiness sector, ready-to-wear, the automotive industry, and ceramics.
When you consume Tunisian, you boost your country's economy and create jobs for youth in many regions. This is how we create wealth and improve the business climate. The made in Tunisia products are a good choice for consumers.
Tunisian Premier Youssef Chahd announced the introduction in school curricula of a new subject on the culture of consuming Tunisian products, starting from school year 2020-2021.
The Tunisian Confederation of Industry, Trade and Handicrafts has urged business managers and professionals to further enhance product quality, control costs, and comply with corporate and social responsibility standards in order to sell local products. Aden Shawishi, CGTN, Tunis.
One last story for you. Businesses from all over the world recently flocked to the continent's largest product sourcing fair in South Africa. Cytex, as it's known, creates a business platform for African enterprises to connect with global companies. But entrepreneurs say more needs to be done to increase trade within the continent. CGTN's Julie Shire filed this report.
International Trade Expo Cytex brings the world to Africa. Exhibitors from Asia, South America, the Middle East and Europe were all at this year's showing.
We want to choose one partner here, and we want to marry with one company, and we want to act like a husband and wife, and we want to penetrate all the South African market with our strong brands.
We are exporting to UK, and we are some countries in Europe like Norway and Germany. And from September, we will get our products in South Africa as well. We are here. It was a very good show, and we found some interesting people.
The expo is also an opportunity for African businesses to market their homegrown products.
There's been a great interest from Botswana. I'm talking to 2 distributors in Botswana, and there's a person from Lesotho who's also interested in supplying their wholesalers in Lesotho.
We've actually made a lot of contacts here. We've made a lot of connections. We actually got people who they actually want to export our products into their countries. That was exciting on our side.
But businesses say more needs to be done to boost African trade. A free trade agreement is principally in place, but business activity is still bound by red tape.
The biggest thing is interconnectivity of countries. Moving around, even from one country to another, we can see how much challenge we have. Those are the other things that we need to deal with.
Everything that moves inside Africa is so expensive to transport. It's cheaper to import and export from Europe to South Africa than from Algeria to South Africa.
52 African countries have signed the free trade agreement, the terms of which are still to be finalized. But if successful, it would realize the dream of a single continental market for goods and services and become the world's largest trading bloc. Julie Shara, CGTN, Johannesburg, South Africa.
All right, then a quick run through currencies here for you. So despite all the negative data we've seen coming out of South Africa in the last 4 weeks, the rand's actually done pretty well. 14.116, 14.12 at one point early in the day. At these levels, it's actually gained about 5% against the dollar in the last 4 weeks. In part, of course, the latest gains coming off the weekend's trade war truce. So the CFA franc, one of the currencies we spoke about at the start of the hour, if that echo replacement ever does come to market as planned, there are quite a few that will be replaced here. The Naira, the Ghanaian Cedi, and of course all of these will essentially have to be rolled into that one currency. But will that happen? We'll have to wait and see. That's it for tonight's edition of Global Business Africa. As always, we'd like to hear your thoughts on the content you've seen here in the last hour. There's several ways to get your thoughts back to us, all of them on your screens right now. I'm Ramah Nyang in the Kenyan capital, Nairobi. Thank you for your company in the last hour. The World Today is up next from Washington, D.C.